Oh.
That was a lot. It's okay.
Oh, we need to figure out what we're drinking.
Oh, shoot.
Wait, what are we drinking?
I don't know.
Oh, shit. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Team Morale Podcast. We do our three favorite things, talk a little booze, a little bit of beer, and a whole lot of basketball. Ian the Tall Guy, back with you again for episode number 57.
Welcome back, squad. Welcome back to all the listeners who I like to consider all of you guys are a part of Team Morale. But you know what I just noticed as we turned the camera on is we got a little bit of twinning going on today.
Oh, yeah, we do, actually.
Yeah, look at that. We're pretty much wearing the same thing. We got the grout fit with the old black backwards hat. It's a good look, though. It's a clean look.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely the uniform of a good Team Morale member is you got to be able to rock a grout fit. And for those who don't know what a grout fit is, basically it's an outfit just made up of different shades of gray.
Oh, yeah. Grout fits, backwards hats. We're definitely hitting like the fall, like comfy, cozy season, too. So I'm about it.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely the time of year where, you don't need to wear stuff form-fitting just, anymore. You can just wear the comfy stuff.
And a natural transition into other people that wear uniforms. Basketball is back. We've got like real like preseason games happening. Like real professional basketball players are playing in front of cameras again.
Yeah. Players are suiting up. Teams are hitting the court. And there's just so much hope in the NBA right now. All these fan bases haven't suffered their losses yet. So everyone's excited. Everyone can win the championship right now.
Oh, it's a new hope for everybody. It's a new season. It's a clean slate. Everyone has got a whole season ahead of them. Everyone is happy going into this season right now, except for the Philadelphia 76ers, of course.
Yeah, there's 29 fan bases out here with so much hope and just excitement for the season, and then there's the 76ers fans who were so mean to Ben Simmons during the playoffs that he just decided to say, fuck you guys, I don't want to play for you anymore.
He's like, you know how much I don't like you guys? I hate you about $18 million worth. That's how much I hate you.
Imagine hating someone so much that you're like, no, I don't need to get paid this year.
I don't want my $18 million. Screw you guys. I'm just not going to play. And that's where they're sitting at right now. It's a sad place over in Philly.
Yeah, it's a weird spot. And but going back to the rest of the teams, there's so much excitement, so much energy right now. All these teams are in the midst of training camp. They just had media day a little while ago, and all of them are just so full of like hope.
Yeah. No, it's a very, very fun part of the season. Everyone always goes into it really excited. Everyone goes into these preseason games. Like, I know, like, me as a Blazer fan, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to watch the preseason games. And then, like, the third quarter hits, and I'm like, ugh, I don't know if I want to watch this anymore. We're starting to get into guys who aren't even going to be on this team later, like, come the regular season.
Yeah, it's watching regular or preseason games is like trying to find a diamond in the rough. You got to watch for the nitty gritty. You got to watch for the little things. I mean, you're just looking for nuggets of information of what the regular season is going to look like for your team.
Exactly. Yeah. It's when you're like really doing the deep dives and like really like stress watching every single little thing that all of your players do. And it's like, oh, he's going to be good this season because he made one good crossover in that preseason game.
Yeah, it's overreaction, season left and right because the smallest of things either get the best, oh my God, this guy's going to be great. And then he has one mess up and he's not going to be very good this year. And speaking of like overreactions, that's kind of what we got on for you guys for today's podcast. We have some statements that Mitch and I put together, and we're going to be buying or selling them.
Oh, yeah. We are going to be very, very rich for this podcast because it's going to be a lot of buying and a lot of selling. We are working the NBA markets today.
Yeah, we're wheeling and dealing when it comes to these statements, and we can't wait to share them with you guys.
Yes, but before we get into all of that was a really loud but. I'm yelling at everybody right now. Before we get into everybody, I want to talk about what Ian and I are drinking tonight, and it was a gift from a dear friend of ours, good old Paul from Kansas City, which is also where the booze is from. It's called Pendergast Royal Gold Bourbon. And I've done a little bit of research on this. You want to hear what the history is on this thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the actual distillery is called from Tom Towns Distillery, which comes out of Kansas City. But it all comes from this guy named Tom Pendergast, who way back in the day in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, like ran Kansas City. Like as a mob boss.
Kansas City had a mob?
It's like, dude, it was like he was like the mob boss like of America. He was so much the mob boss that he ignored all of Prohibition.
Wait, so first off, Kansas City had a mob, and second off, that mob was the mob of all the mobs.
Oh yeah, it was like the mob's mob. Oh yeah.
This is news to me.
So yeah, so this Tom Pendergast, he like ran Kansas City, and his first job when he moved to Kansas City was working in a saloon, and then that moved into selling booze, and then somehow he became like the mob boss. He ran the entire town. It was like one of the only towns in all of America that was still selling booze during the Prohibition. They called it Paris of the Plains. Kansas City, Paris of the Plains.
Well, I mean, if you can get booze there, I guess the shoe fits.
Yeah. So that's where the name comes from. But Tomstown, the distillery, and this booze has only been around since like 2021. But that's where they originally came up with the name.
So it's a brand new whiskey, but with a very storied name.
Yes, exactly. So very new. Thank you, Paul, for giving this to us. If you're watching on YouTube, Ethan and I have already cracked about half the bottle through. So we'll see if we can actually make it through this entire podcast before we are falling out of our chairs.
Yeah, we've got a long way to go. We've got 6 of these statements that we are going to be talking about today. And we'll break them down. We'll do 3, and then we'll take a break, revisit this whiskey. We'll do our talk taste segment, and then we'll come back and do the last 3. Let's start with what we were talking about to start the podcast, which would be the preseason. And I'll say the statement, and then Mitch, you can weigh in, and then I'll weigh in after you. Our first statement here is buying or selling. The preseason is important to players, to coaches, to fans. The preseason in general is something that is important and should be monitored.
Okay. You know what? I honestly, I could go a little on either way on this, but I'm gonna buy that it's important. I think that there are elements to the preseason that's important. Overall, could I go without the preseason? Probably. But
as a fan,
I like having it. I feel like I'm getting like a little like sneak peek into my team like before the season comes, and like almost like I'm watching a practice sort of thing. So I do think that there are elements, especially to certain teams more so than others, but the preseason is important. What about you?
I think I'm going to sell this one.
Yeah.
And the reasoning here is I hear what you're saying with that it's important, but I don't really know to who. The fans don't really care. The players really don't care. The coaches do everything in their power to end the games as quickly as they can. I mean, there was a preseason game a couple years ago where it came down to the last shot, and it was a Mavericks game. And Carlisle, trying to get the game to end, drew up a Boban fadeaway 3 so that they made sure they lost because they were like down 1 with like 6 seconds left, and they had the ball. And they're like, I don't want anyone to or they were down 3 or whatever. They don't want to tie. And so basically he drew up a Boban fadeaway so that either it was a meme or it was going to be a loss. And so I think it's similar to the NFL preseason. It's a waste of time. I mean, the players already know, all of them know how to play basketball. It's not like they need to, reinvent the wheel every year. It might help, some teams with new coaches, but that's what training camp's for. That's what it's for. And like, I think you could get away by allowing teams to do joint practices, which would be like, for example, the Blazers and the Mavericks, could reach out to each other. Hey, you want to, we could come up to Portland for a week, do a joint practice together, and accomplish the same thing of a week of preseason games.
Yeah, I definitely see all of that. I think that where the preseason becomes important is for like very specific teams. So let's say your team either has new players. Let's talk about like the Chicago Bulls, pretty much a brand new roster. Brought in, still working in Vucevic from last season, brought in DeRozan, brought in Lonzo Ball, brand new starting 5. You want to kind of tweak some things. You want to see what you can do. So you play them. Basically they play the first half and then they yank all of the guys that are important. And then it's just like the roster fillers afterwards. But you want to see like what's happening with those guys. And then you have the other teams that are like young teams. You want, like, if you're the Thunder, you want to try out a bunch of guys. And if you're like the Kings, you want to see it. Does this 3-guard lineup have anything like have any like merit to it? The whole like De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, Davion Mitchell lineup. So there are elements going into the season where it's actually useful for the team to like try some stuff out in a competitive / non-competitive format.
See, but that's what training camp's for. everything you just described is basically the reason they have training camp. They can tweak things, they can run scrimmages there. It does the same thing. And the players are in an environment where it's not uberly competitive, so they're not risking the chance of getting hurt. The fact that, like you said yourself at the beginning of the podcast, are like, by the third quarter, I kind of regret watching it because there's nothing really worth watching there, kind of shows me that the preseason might just not be important. And like, if we could just start the year, like, think about how valuable it would be if the NBA started, the 2 weeks earlier and they got more rest throughout the year. And instead of, trying to cram 82 games in the, the whatever weeks, they add 2 whole weeks from which they normally do the preseason, and they can, give less back-to-backs, more days off.
It's actually a really good idea. I like that idea.
Adam Silver, hear me out. I have a business idea for you.
So I know for a fact that Adam Silver actually listens to this podcast every single week when they come out on Wednesdays. And he texts me every single Wednesday night telling me about like how much he liked our podcast and all the good ideas that we have and like what he's going to take from it. So I think that that's one you should listen to, Adam.
Yeah.
We're on a first name basis.
Oh, first name basis. You play squash on Tuesdays or something?
Dude, electric squash player. Adam Silver is amazing.
Big pickleball guy, Adam.
I could see Adam Silver being a pickleball guy. He doesn't seem like a actually go and play basketball guy.
No, he doesn't seem like the athlete that his players in the league are.
No,
but
he looks like Barnacle Boy.
Wow.
He does. He actually does. Have you
if
seen
Adam
the meme?
is listening, dear God.
Oh no, we joke about that all the time. We joke about that all the time. He loves that joke.
All right. Let's move on to our next statement here, which is one that I know some of our fellow Team Morale members would have a heavy interest in, which would be, Edison, ASM Edison and Big Mike, which because it involves the Los Angeles Lakers. And they're big Laker fans. But there are 2 super teams right now in the NBA, the Nets and the Lakers. So my statement to you is it a foregone conclusion that it's a Nets-Lakers finals?
Well, it does feel as though it is going to, if everything plays out the way that the paper tells us it'll play out, it'll be a Nets-Lakers final. So I guess I'll buy this, but I'm buying it hesitantly.
Yeah, I mean, I probably buy this one as well, and it hurts me to do so because I don't want either of those teams to be in the finals because we had like 2 years of parity in the NBA.
It was so much fun,
glorious. We didn't know who was going to win. We didn't know who the best teams were. We had like 10 teams that had all pairs of 2, and it was awesome. There was a Batman and a Robin on every team, and they duke it out, and every game was incredible. Well, now the Nets and the Lakers decided to just ruin that because they, decided to go back to the big 3 format. And now it'll just be a matter of time before parity in the NBA is dead again. And, it'll be about, who can just, amass the biggest arms, I guess I'm saying, like an arms race, basically.
Yeah, it is an arms race. It's turning back into kind of what it was even just a few years ago with the Warriors, Cavs, and it was just them back and forth every year. So my heart is hurt because I hate both of them. I want all 28 other teams to win. It hurts because it's the loss of parity. I mean, I don't think anyone in the league, I don't think any fan or executive or player or coach would have guessed that the Suns and the Hawks both were going to be in the conference finals respectively for their conferences. It's a loss for that. It's a loss for the fans who like watching parity. It's a plus for the fans that really love the superstar finals. That like there's a lot of fans out there in the NBA sphere where they're more fans of just like players than they are of teams. So I could see a lot of people really buying in and like loving and really watching a Nets Lakers finals. But my head also tells me as to why I wouldn't put a ton of money on this bet. I do buy that they're the most likely to make it, but I think that they're also 2 of the most likely to have injuries.
I was literally just about to weigh in and say, you're talking about 2 of probably the most injury riddled teams of last year. And probably 2 of the most like injury happy teams in the NBA. I mean, Anthony Davis has dealt with injuries his whole career. Kevin Durant coming off an Achilles. James Harden dealing with that hamstring that's nagged him for seems like a decade now. Kyrie Irving, you never know where the guy's at. He could not show up for a month.
He might just not want to play.
Yeah, he could just not show up. Russell Westbrook seems to be the only like Iron Man in these, the 2 teams with in terms of superstars. And then there's the other thing about the Lakers, especially. You got a lot of old players on both teams.
Both
I
teams
mean,
have a
both
lot of old
teams
guys.
have a lot of age on their rosters, a lot of miles on them, and so old cars break down sometimes, and so it's not out of the realm of possibilities that these teams could deal with some heavy injuries this year.
Yeah, I'm going to be rooting against both of them. I'm not rooting for injuries. I'm just rooting that neither of them make the finals. And if one of them does make the finals, then I have some little guy to cheer for the whole time. But yes, it does. It feels like it's going to be like the evil empire versus the evil empire right now.
I will combat you a little bit here in that I wouldn't be upset if they met in the finals once. Like one year where they went at it and it was just a, what is it? The Godzilla versus King Kong battle movie that came out a little while ago.
Yeah.
Like just these two behemoths going at each other. But I don't want to be on this podcast, hopefully 5 years from now,
Talking about
and
these
still
two
talking about the
teams.
Nets and the Lakers still being they've been like, oh, they've made 4 of the last 5 finals against each other, and the one they didn't, someone got hurt, and it was the Lakers versus some random team, and they swept them, type of thing. Like, I want parity back in the NBA, and I'm hoping that these two teams didn't ruin it by just getting all the stars that they could.
So quickly before we move on to our next subject, of those two teams, if they make it, who are you rooting for?
Ooh.
You already know my answer. For those of you who don't know, big time Blazer fan, big time Lakers hater, boo Lakers, go Nets.
I think I'd root for the Lakers. I would.
That'll be fun for us.
I grew up in LA, so I don't like the Lakers by any means, but I mean they were my hometown team growing up. I don't. I mean the Clippers were too, but after the last 2 years of the Clippers knocking the Mavs out of the playoffs, I don't associate with them. And I just don't like Kevin Durant. I'm not a Kevin Durant guy. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't like my NBA. I don't like my athletes DMing kids and like cursing at them personally. For me,
I prefer my athletes doing that. That's so funny. No, I'm with you.
I would like them
I'm
to
not
have
a huge
at least
Durant guy either.
somewhat thick of skin to where like some 13-year-old named Kevin is like figuring out how to type still and is saying something mean about Kevin Durant. And Kevin Durant's like, hold on, Kevin, 13-year-old from New York. I don't like that.
I just think it's funny that like players have I think all players have burner accounts, and I thought it was even funnier that like we're on a whole tangent right now, but that like almost everybody when they're caught with a burner account or whatever, they're like, oh no, like someone hacked me. And then when Kevin Durant got caught, he's like, nah, that was me. That was all me, guys. That's my bad.
I don't necessarily know if they all have burner accounts. I'm sure
they all do.
They all have secondary accounts that are like not known to the public so that their like friends and family can follow them.
So it's a burner account.
Burner account, but they're not DMing kids telling them to fuck off.
It's just different uses. So if that does happen, you and me are going to have a nice little quarrel about it because we're going to be going for different guys.
Absolutely. Let's move on to our last one here before we take a break. And that is the statement of Ben Simmons will be traded before the start of the season.
Ooh, see, I don't know.
Well, you have to buy or sell
well,
it.
I was going to say something. I don't know, but I'm going to buy this because Ben
buy that he will be traded.
He will be traded because he is like Ben Simmons is really, really pushing the hand of the Philadelphia 76ers though. And it seems like they have, at least the reports have said that they have reached out several different times to Ben Simmons to try to like, make things better, to try to get him back into camp, to try to get him to like at least buy in a little bit to maybe being a Sixer next year. And he's just not about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's Ben Simmons went from like having none of the leverage to having some of the leverage the closer he got to the start of the season, which is why I'm going to sell this. I think that Ben Simmons isn't going to report to camp and the 76ers are sitting there, wanting the King's ransom for him. And I just don't think that they're going to get it. And so they're going to hold out and wait until some sucker decides to, trade him. So I think that it's going to bleed into the regular season. I think it could go as far as close to the trade deadline to where some team in need of a guy like Ben Simmons is willing to pay for him. And he might not play. He might not play this year.
Wow. What a weird existence the Ben Simmons thing is right now. I'm with you. The reason I was hesitant about buying, and I went back and forth on this, is because the label will he be traded like before the season starts? Because he will be traded.
At some point, he will
At
be
some
traded.
point, Ben Simmons will go to another basketball team that is willing to give up enough things for the Sixers to say yes to it. But I don't know if that's going to happen before the season starts, because a lot of teams right now are kind of settling into what their teams are. They're trying to figure out what their teams are going into this year, and the Sixers very publicly have had super high demands for a Ben Simmons trade, and no one's matched those demands yet, or else they would have pulled trigger already. So I'm with you. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm going to buy that the Sixers are going to panic and trade at some point.
I mean, it is the waiting game of like, how long are the Sixers willing to wait for the package that they want? You know, and it's also like, will that package come? I mean, for this particular statement that, you know, the start of the regular season, we have a little over 2 weeks before the regular season starts. So it's whether or not the Sixers are going to get desperate and just basically pounce on a deal that the best deal available, as opposed to waiting for the deal that they want.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. That's definitely going to be the biggest headline for this entire preseason, because nothing fun happens out of preseason for SportsCenter to talk about, except for maybe like a good dunk or something like that. No one who's a casual fan actually cares about like the intricacies of what's going on in preseason, even though it may be important. I want to throw that out there. I get that it's boring, but it still might be important for the teams. But yeah, so what everyone's going to talk about is the Sixers. They are going to be the main people in the media, in the headlines for the next 2 weeks until something has happened.
Yeah, absolutely. That exhausts our first three. Let's take a break here and talk taste on this whiskey.
Okay. All right. So I have not looked at it, but I do have the notes, the tasting notes pulled up. All right.
All right. And for those who might be new to this podcast, what we generally do, or what we have been doing the last little bit, is wow. A little ASMR for you guys. What we normally do, and what we have been doing lately, is we have been Googling the tasting notes on these whiskeys, because we tried to taste and explain what they taste like ourselves, and it's not nearly good enough, because all we do is taste cherry, vanilla, and hickory, basically, which is whiskey in a nutshell. So we get a little bit more oomph out of reading what we're supposed to taste and then tasting it. But what we like to do is drink it first, kind of explain what we taste, and then read the tasting notes, so that we're like, see if we're right, type of thing.
Yeah. So we have certainly, over the course of our 57 episodes, have gotten better. Specifically, you've got better.
Yeah. Again, for those who are new to us, at the beginning of this podcast, I could get down about Tennessee honey level whiskey, and that was about it.
That was your favorite.
It might still be my favorite. That being said, I can now, and the other thing was, I used to have to basically drown it in ice.
You're a 3-cube guy.
Not anymore. I was a 3-cube guy.
Yeah.
But I'm
getting
there now.
You're getting better. Okay.
Anyways, what are you tasting?
All right. So what we're drinking is Pendergast's Royal Gold bourbon whiskey. So this is coming out of Kansas City. I'm going to take one more little sip.
You're a loud sipper.
I like to have the listeners hear me sip. It's nice. I think it's a nice thing. Nice touch. Anyways, so it's definitely spicy on like the back end. So it's very, very smooth when you drink it, tip of your tongue. And then once you're swallowing, that's when you start getting a little bit of that extra spice on it. So we've been doing more notes and stuff, and it gives you more ideas of what it might taste like. And I think I get a little bit of leather. I've seen that be a thing before.
A common occurrence on these tasting notes is like dried leather.
That's not a common occurrence. Oh, on the real notes.
Yeah, on the real notes.
Notes. We never say leather.
We never say that. But on the real notes, I would say I get a lot of pepper. It's like a different type of burn than like your typical whiskey. It's a little like peppery, like, you know, when you like eat something really peppery and it like kind of burns on the way down, but it doesn't like, it's not like you ate something spicy. It's just like, ooh,
yeah,
type of thing on the way down. I get a lot of pepper. I do get the smoothness at the front. Normally I get some sort of like fruit or citrusness to it. I don't get that in this particular whiskey. I don't necessarily get vanilla either, or honey, but there is a taste at the front that I'm curious to see what it says and watch it be fruit,
Yeah,
it's got vanilla and honey. I'm sure there's vanilla in there, because every whiskey has vanilla.
Every whiskey has some sort of vanilla. I will say that, like, I think that there's like the scent and like a little bit of the flavor is like a little floral. I think that that's where the softness comes from.
Yeah, I would agree. It definitely smells like not flowers, but it definitely smells like some sort of like floralness to it.
Okay. So this is straight from their website.
Okay.
The tasting notes are caramelized sugar, pleasant
Caramel.
caramel.
Damn it.
Caramel. That's one of our go-tos too.
I knew I tasted something. Son of a nutcracker.
All right. Sugar, pleasant oak. Not
As
just
opposed
oak.
to unpleasant oak.
I hate when I get unpleasant oak in my whiskey. It's the worst. It's a real bitch. And stone fruits.
Stone fruits.
I don't know do you want me to Google a stone fruit?
I'm on it.
You're on it?
I'm on it. You keep going.
Okay. But yeah, so it is, let's see. We finished Royal Gold and hand-selected 14-year-old ruby port casks.
Oh.
So they get the really old cask. That's why it's a special one. Apparently this has won a bunch of awards on it too.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, we're dumb. Stone fruits are basically fruits with like the stone pits. So like peaches, mangoes, nectarines, apricots, plums.
So it's not like stoned fruits.
You know what
Like
though?
pre-smoked?
I feel better
You know
because
what I
when I
mean?
say I
Wink,
didn't
wink,
get,
hunch, hunch.
I didn't get I didn't get fruit when I drank it, and I feel like none of those are like super hit you in the face type of fruits.
No, they're all the casual fruits. And I will say those are the fruits that I don't like as much. I don't like stoned fruits. I prefer them unstoned.
We get it. You're talking about weed.
I'm not. I'm talking about stoned fruits right now. I do quite like this whiskey. I am already finishing. Wow, I'm finishing my second glass. I am really hurrying through this thing, aren't I? What we've been doing lately is rating these things.
Yes, we have. It's a thing that we did 3 podcasts ago, I believe. Then we took a break, and then
For White Claw.
Yeah,
we took a break for White Claw.
We didn't want to rank White
How are
Claw.
you going to rate White Claw?
We had different flavors. We didn't know what to do. Anyways, we did it 3 podcasts ago. Took a break. Did it last podcast. Mitch, what are you giving this whiskey?
Okay, I would describe it as a bit harsher.
It definitely punches you in the face. Like
Yeah.
It's not one that you're gonna casually sip and be like, ooh, this is easy going. Like this one, you're gonna have to work through a little bit, especially the back end. The back end is super spicy.
Yeah, I wouldn't give this to someone who just turned 21 on their birthday. They might stop, drinking hard whiskeys. I like those types of whiskeys though. I like the spice. I like how smooth the feeling is, kind of silky. I'm going to give it an 8.1.
An 8.1.
8.1.
Is that your highest ranking? No,
I had an
8.6.
8.6. I had an 8.6
last week.
last
You had
week.
an 8.6. I'm gonna talk through my process a little bit here. It's a really good whiskey. It punches you in the face a lot, especially when you drink it like before it's diluted by a little bit of ice. Like we have whiskey balls in here, which for those who don't know are the big balls of whiskey that melt at a slower rate because they have less surface area, so they dilute your whiskey a little bit slower.
Science.
That being said,
These are science lesson of the day.
when you drink it without it being, diluted by a little bit of the ice, a little bit of the water, it's so spicy you don't really taste any of the flavor. You just get you get smooth and then spicy. When you drink it after it's diluted a little bit, you then get a little bit of that flavor, that little bit of that caramel that I wasn't talking about that I wish I was type of thing.
Yeah, we missed on all of our things.
But it is good. It is good. I would give it a 7.5.
7.5 is
which
fine.
I think might be my highest ranking yet.
It might be. You're being a little bit more.
I'm the Simon Cowell of alcohol. I'm telling you right now.
Guess so.
I've said before. I'll say it again. I'm waiting to be blown away.
I'm the Reggie Jackson.
This is. I mean, don't get me wrong. 7.5 is good. I mean, we talked about this last podcast, but you're like, well, that's a C, and I was like, no. For me, for the grading scale, which is fucked, a 50 is a fail. For me, if I gave it a 2 out of 10, that's a fail.
But a 5
is like it's good.
You're a perfectly medium.
Yeah, for me,
whiskey.
5 is like medium.
I've been mentally going more on like the school grading scale. Also, I also just said Reggie Jackson, and I meant Randy Jackson. I wanted to clarify that. But yes, that is fair. I'm more on like the school scale where it's like if you're in the 6s, like you're pretty subpar for me. If you're in the 5s, like you should start debating what you're doing and stop making whiskey. And if you're in the 4s, just hang it up.
See, for me, and I guess I'm going a little bit differently. for your 4 is my like 2 or 1.
See, everyone's allowed to have their own scale, though.
That's fine. We
That's
should
how this
probably be
thing
on
works.
the same scale.
Nah.
No.
Nah.
All right.
It's better
fair
this way.
enough.
Everyone's different.
All right. Anyways, so
I'm
I
gonna have
gave it a
more, though.
7.5. You gave it an 8.1,
8.1.
which is both passing grades, both very good. Give it a try if you ever have an opportunity. It's a little bit difficult to get in, Texas or outside of Kansas City. This was actually, like he said earlier, my buddy Paul, big fan of the podcast, a friend of the podcast. We actually invited him to be on the podcast when we did this whiskey. He politely declined. He did not want to be on the mic, which is fair.
He lives a private life, that guy.
But anyways, he actually brought this back from Kansas City.
For us.
This flew back from Kansas City for us to be on the podcast. So thank you, Paul. We appreciate it.
Very
It's
fascinating.
a very good whiskey.
Very fascinating story behind it too. With the whole it was it's named after. I guess in Kansas City, they know the story much more than we do. But yeah, the Tom Pendergast ran Kansas City. Wasn't the mayor, but just nothing happened without his say. And he found it. His buddy was Harry Truman, who turned into the president. I saw that also in the article.
Full of tidbits, you.
Full of tidbits. I know a lot about whiskey, and even less about everything else.
All right, so let's get back into these statements here. We've got 3 more to go, and the next one's a bit of a comparison. Last offseason can be kind of described as an offseason of retention. Players kind of stayed put. They got extensions. A lot of money was thrown around, but players kind of stayed put.
Yes. Yeah, so it was definitely a little different than what a lot of people went into the offseason thinking. A lot of people went into the offseason being like, oh, there's going to be a lot of player movement. I specifically remember one national reporter like Kevin O'Connor or something like that being like, I expect a lot of movement this offseason. So then when guys like that were saying that, I was expecting a lot of movement. There wasn't. There wasn't all that much movement. It was mainly guys staying put.
Yeah, this was interesting because the 2021 free agency class was kind of legendary. There were so many good players in it. Way back in the day, you had Giannis, you had Kawhi, you had Paul George, all these guys, and all these guys resigned. Rudy Gobert, another one. So all these guys resigned, all these guys kind of stayed put. There were 2 teams though that kind of went a different route.
Bucked the trend, if you will.
Yeah, they did their own thing. They beat to their own drum, and that would be the Chicago Bulls and the Miami Heat. They kind of overhauled their whole rosters, and you and I kind of both went on record saying they were the winners of the offseason.
Yes, no, absolutely. Both of these franchises, I think, saw an opportunity coming into this next year. That opportunity is the Nets are clearly the front runners, right? The Bucks just recently won the championship. I think that it's fair to say that a lot of these teams think that they can beat the Bucks in a playoff series. And I think that the Hawks made it to the conference finals, and you're like, we could beat them. The Sixers are starting to fall apart. So the Heat and the Bulls were both like, we need to make moves now. Not yesterday, not in the future. We need to be good right now. This is one of the best opportunities we have in the Eastern Conference to make a good run through the playoffs and make it to the finals. And that's exactly what both of these teams did.
Yeah, and you saw the Bulls doing that at the deadline. You know, big buyers at the deadline, and the Heat, getting Kyle Lowry and retaining, Oladipo, and all the moves that they made a lot of changes as well. And so this is my statement to you: our 2 big winners, the Bulls or the Heat. You have to buy one and you have to sell one. Who are you buying and who are you selling?
Ooh, all right. So I can't take both of them. I gotta have to pick one.
You got to buy one and you got to sell one.
I gotta pick one. All right. I'm gonna preface this with this: is that the Heat seem to me like the older, more veteran team, where the Bulls have maybe a more theoretically high ceiling than the Heat do. But I think the Heat are more guaranteed to be a better team no matter how the season shakes out. So I'm going to buy the Heat. I think that their floor is much higher than the Bulls' floor, even if the Bulls' ceiling might be higher.
And
so I'm buying the floor.
And that's where I disagree. I'm buying the ceiling.
Okay.
I was about to say I think that the Bulls could pop or flop, for lack of a better word, and I'm buying that they're going to pop. I think that this team, and I'll go on record saying this, could be a finals contender.
Ooh.
I think they are good enough to score with the best of them. They have a ton of scorers. They have one of the best benches in the NBA, and their pieces fit so well together in terms of their Lonzo is a selfless, not star, but a selfless point guard who defends very well, is a willing passer, is learning to be a better shooter so he can play off ball a little bit, which is perfect for a guy next to Zach LaVine.
And DeRozan.
You have Vucevic, where if all else goes to fail and you're stuck in the half court, hand it to him on the block and just get out of the way. And I think if you look at the teams in the East, yes, the Bucks are a worry, stopping Giannis, but Patrick Williams is one of the most skilled defenders in the NBA, and he's going into year 2. He'll put some weight on, and he'll definitely be able to hang with them like everybody else. And like if they run into the Nets in a playoff series, they hand the ball to Vooch every time. I mean, the Nets don't have a center, and so I'm buying the fact that the Bulls are going to pop. This is not a knock on the Heat. I love their grit, their grind. They're an Eric Spoelstra's dream team.
They are.
This is
they
what
really
Eric
are.
Spoelstra dream, falls asleep, has a dream, a perfect team. This is what Spoelstra wants. But I think that the ceiling of the Bulls is higher than the ceiling of the Heat. I think the Heat are a conference finals team and nothing more.
See, I would disagree with that. I think both teams genuinely have a chance at a championship should the chips fall the right way. Now, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here with the Bulls because you did call the Suns last year.
I did.
I was not. I was like,
I also called the Hawks. I didn't say a playoff. I didn't think they'd have the playoff run, but I thought they would be a top seed, a top whatever seed it was.
We both thought the Hawks be good, but you were like very high on the Suns. I was like, they'll make the playoffs, but I'm not sure how much higher they're going to get than that. You were like, oh, they're going to be like a top 4-2 seed sort of thing. So you nailed that. So maybe your intuition is carrying over here also with the Bulls, and I'm just a big dummy-dumb. And
I could also be very wrong. That being said, I do have a very similar feeling to the Bulls that I did the Suns, and it just seems to fit. All the puzzle pieces seem to fit. Now, Monty Williams and Billy Donovan are both great coaches. Monty Williams being the coach of the Suns, Billy Donovan being the coach of the Bulls. I don't know if Billy Donovan's up to the task because that's a lot of egos to deal with. That's a lot of, creation and shot making ability for one basketball.
Yep.
So they're going to have to figure that out. The Bulls kind of maybe have a poor man's big four. They have 4 really, really, really good players. None of them I would consider great.
Yes.
They don't have the super team big 3 of 3 great players like the Nets or the Lakers have, but they have 4 really, really good players.
And I will throw this out there. I think that LaVine has the potential to be great.
I would agree.
I think that LaVine has the potential to be great.
He's got to learn to play some defense, in my opinion, before he decides to be great.
Funny that you bring that up because that is my biggest quarrel when it comes to the whole Bulls thing is you can't rely on just Patrick Williams to play defense. Lonzo has proved that he can play defense. So I'm not going to argue with it there. LaVine needs to show his athleticism, which he has plenty of, and he could be a good defender, but he needs to start prioritizing that and start realizing I don't need to work as hard on offense so I can focus more on defense. I would say the same thing with DeRozan, who showed good defensive metrics last year with the Spurs, but I would not call a stopper by any means. That is where the issues may start with the Bulls come postseason is, how are you defending Durant? How are you defending Giannis? Patrick Williams, if he takes a big step up and plays similarly to Kawhi Leonard with the Spurs, this is before Kawhi Leonard was Kawhi Leonard. This was when he was still kind of a young guy, and they're oh, he's really good. He's a very good defender, very athletic. If he can pull that off, then they can win a championship. Totally with you. That's why I think they have a very high ceiling. But the reason I love the Heat is they're going to play defense every single game. When you got Kyle Lowry, when you got Jimmy Butler, when you have PJ Tucker, when you have Bam Adebayo, that team is one of the best defensive teams in the entire league, and they're not going out any sooner than a 6-game series in any series. They're going to fight every single time and make you work hard.
Yeah, when you play the Heat, you're leaving battered and bruised.
Oh yeah.
You are going to feel it the next day because they are going to be physical. They're going to be in your face. They're going to probably toe the line of you're going to be in the bonus early against them because you're going to have to earn every single bucket. It's going to be a slugfest every time you play the Heat. They're going to turn every game into basically a rock fight. And so I again, when I picked the Bulls, I picked them because of their pieces. I think Levine can take that Devin Booker like step defensively,
Yep.
like Devin Booker made this year. I think Vucevic is the rebounder that could really,
Great
impact on
rebounder.
a game. And so I do really like the Heat or the Bulls. But that being said, the Heat I love as well. They are, a hard nosed team. The big difference for me between the two is the Bulls have more time. The Heat need to win like this year or next year because all their players are, not all, but most of their players are past their prime. And 3 years from now, the team's going to look very different.
Yeah. I'm just going to throw this out there. It might be a hot take, but I think both these teams end up in the top 4 seeds and the Sixers fall. I bet it's like Nets, Bucks, Heat, Bulls in no particular order.
Yeah. So let's move on. We were talking earlier about extensions and players signing big money extensions. And the big topic that was tossed around a lot this offseason in terms of extensions was the rookie max, which went to one Luka Doncic, who I think everyone in the league was like no brainer. It went to Trae Young, which again, after last year, I think everyone in the league was like no brainer. Before that, there were some questions, but this last year, Trae Young proved it and he was like, all right, no brainer. And then it went to Michael Porter Jr., which had some non-Nuggets fans a little bit like, wow, all right, the Nuggets are buying into what they are. And that is, a team led by Nikola Jokic, the former MVP, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. And so my statement to you, Mitch, is Michael Porter Jr. is worth the money.
Whew. Now this is hard for me because I've been an outward supporter of Michael Porter Jr. I have ever since he joined the league. I remember watching his very first summer league game. I saw Michael Porter Jr. take one jump shot, and I was like, that guy will be a superstar. I was like, everything about his movement, his fluidity, the way he shoots the ball, the way he approaches the game, just screamed all-star superstar to me. So this is tough because we're talking about like Luka, Trae. We're talking about like even Shea didn't get the same extension.
No, Shea got the 4-year deal.
Yeah.
This is a 5-year deal worth $207 million, which is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Trae Young and Luka have both been starters in the All-Star game.
Yes.
Michael Porter Jr. hasn't sniffed the All-Star game.
Oh no. Not even
like kind of in like, maybes. Like Trae and Luka are both solidified all-stars going forward. I mean, both have started. Trae missed last year, but he was a starter his rookie year. Or no, not his rookie year, his second year. But both of them have been like, bona fide all-stars and have, been to the playoffs. And Trae has won a couple series and led his team. Luka has, done the Luka magic thing, put up crazy triple doubles, breaking all sorts of stats for a guy his age. And Michael Porter Jr. has been fine. He's been good.
He's been better than good. He's been better than good for sure. So
I mean, in the playoffs, I guess in the playoffs he was fine. He was
fine. I think that he got a little butchered by the fact that he can't create off the dribble all that well, and that's kind of like what Jamal's.
So you're giving a guy and I guess this will lead to what I'm selling this. I don't think he's worth the money, mainly because you're giving a guy who's basically a catch and shoot machine, and I'll go on record saying he has the prettiest jump shot in the NBA. His jump shot is the most easy looking, is the prettiest thing. I'm not saying he's a bad basketball player, but is he on the same level as Luka and Trae and worth that super max? Hell no.
So where I fall is not, is he worth it right now? Because I would agree with you. He's not on the max level player. If you want to go by the theory, which I and a lot of other people go by, where a max player is an all-star caliber player, and by all-star caliber is like either guaranteed all-star or like flirting with all-star game every year, he's not there right now. I totally agree. But I think he will be there. I think that he's going to be a guy that flirts with the all-star game, and I think it's going to come sooner than later. I think it's going to be in a year or two that he starts flirting with the all-star game, and he'll be worth it. I've been a big buyer tonight, got a ton of cash in my pockets. I'm buying that he's worth it. I'm buying that Michael Porter Jr. is worth this money.
That's a lot of money to put on a maybe.
I didn't put a lot of money down tonight.
No. I'm saying by the Nuggets.
Yes.
That's a lot of money, because let's say Michael Porter Jr. kind of is what he is. Again, great player. He's a good player. Not a knock on him at all. The prettiest jump shots, a great shooter at 6'10". and moves like a small forward shooting guard. But you're paying him like you're basically saying that Jamal Murray, Jokic, and Michael Porter Jr. You are our chance of winning a championship.
Yep.
And
So
does his like solidification with that core, is that core good enough to win a championship?
So that's the funny part is that will be the biggest question mark is Michael Porter Jr. Now, there's a couple things to this. One thing is when you sign a guy to a max contract, you now can afford to trade for another max contract guy. So in theory, dude, go ahead and open that thing up, man. Give yourself some booze. Give me some booze while you're at it. When you are the Nuggets, you now have Michael Porter Jr. on a max contract. Let's say in 2 years, Michael Porter Jr. is still only 23, 24 years old, ton of potentials, looking good, but not great. Then you can still trade that max contract for another max contract plus some first round picks, get someone else that may fit better. But I do think that this core can win a championship, mainly because of the fit that Porter has around Jamal and Jokic. So long-winded, yes.
It's interesting because I kind of see him, and this might be completely wrong in your eyes, but I kind of see him a very similar way to like Klay Thompson on the Warriors way back in the day, is that he's the offensive lubricant. But Klay Thompson was an all defensive team type of guy.
Yes, very true.
Michael Porter Jr. isn't even interested in playing defense.
That's why they got Aaron Gordon.
But I'm just saying that the three of them is the core. And Jamal Murray is an okay defender. He tries. He actually gives effort.
Probably subpar overall.
I would say he's a below average, but his effort is there.
Cap.
Michael Porter Jr. is a below average defender metrics wise because he's just a little bit slow footed.
Yep.
And he doesn't even give a shit about defense. And Jokic, he tries, but he's just not athletic enough to be a great defender. So that is my problem with this Nuggets team in terms of those three can be the core of a finals team. It's like none of them play defense, and you need the playoffs show that defense wins championships. I mean, the Bucks, great defensive team. The Heat, yeah, they didn't win it. They lost to the Lakers, who are a great defensive team, but the two that made the finals were defensive stalwarts. The Suns, a very good defense. Like offense gets you to the postseason, defense wins in the postseason, and that's where I see the Nuggets falling short.
No, I totally agree with you. I do think that strides can be made. I think that I would say Jokic is a slightly above average defender because he actually is. He's so thick.
If you mix in rebounding, then yes.
Yeah.
But if you're like saying like that guy gets roasted in the pick and roll.
Yes, he does. Yeah. He gets cooked in the pick and roll. I mean, the tough thing is like, it's tough having some like slow footed guys because you're right. Where Michael Porter Jr. really struggles is that lateral quickness. He doesn't and you can see it on offense and on defense. It's why he's not a great creator on offense, and on defense, it's why he's not a great defender because he doesn't move side to side all that well.
But the guy is 6'10", so he has like size to where like if he gave effort on defense, he could be okay. He could make himself an average defender if he wanted. It's just like the guy just doesn't have it in him at this point in his career.
No, I totally agree with you. I'm glad that we picked this as one of our things because you and me very much disagree on this. I think that he's worth it. I think that the Nuggets definitely have a chance of making it to the finals with this core. Is it ready-made right now? No. But Jokic is only like 25, 26 years old. Murray's only about 24 years old. Porter's only about 21, 22 years old. These guys have plenty of time to grow and even outlast the Lakers and the Nets and potentially become the super team going into the following years after these teams. Are they going to make the finals this year? I don't think so, but could they make the finals in the next 5 years? I think so.
So let's get to our last statement here. And there have been a lot of coaching changes this offseason. Your team got a new head coach. My team got a new head coach. A lot of teams had new head coaches. I think there was between 6 and 8 different head coaches that are different teams that changed head coaches this year. But let's get into this. Buy a new head coach and sell a new head coach. You want by buy, I mean, which head coach do you think is going to just, do really well, especially off the start, and which head coach you think is going to struggle?
Okay. So you're right on the money with 6 to 8 because it's 7. Well done. Okay, so there's been 7 head coaching changes. We're not counting the Nate McMillan taking over Lloyd Pierce midway through the season last year, because obviously we know that's going well. So, of all the new ones, I'm just going to read these off real quick so everyone knows. So, the Boston Celtics moved on from Brad Stevens, who took on a GM role or president role with the Celtics, and then he hired Ime Udoka. The Dallas Mavericks moved on from longtime head coach Rick Carlisle, and they got Jason Kidd, former All-Star in the NBA. The Pacers moved on from Nate Bjorkgren, I'm glad he's out. He's got a very hard name to pronounce. I'm kind of tired of that guy.
He also
anyways.
wasn't very liked.
Yeah, yeah, he was hated. They brought in Rick Carlisle, coach of the Mavs. New Orleans Pelicans moved on from the veteran head coach of Stan Van Gundy, moved on to former player and brand new head coach Willie Green. Orlando Magic moved on from Steve Clifford. They brought in Jamal Mosley, ex-assistant coach for the Mavericks. The Blazers moved on from Terry Stotts, who was there for 9 seasons, and then they brought in former All-Star Chauncey Billups. And the Washington Wizards moved on from Scott Brooks, who'd been around for a long time with the Thunder, and then the Wizards, and they moved on from him, and they brought in Wes Unseld Jr., not to be mistaken for his father, Wes Unseld, who was like the best player the Wizards have ever had.
So a lot of history with that.
Whew. All right. I got through all that.
Yeah, you did. Well done. So I'm going to make you talk again. Who are you buying in terms of a head coach?
Okay. So I am a little biased in this front. I'm going to buy Ime Udoka with the Boston Celtics. Ime Udoka played for the San Antonio Spurs, won a championship with the Spurs, consummate professional. He's bounced around to several different head assistant jobs, including the Philadelphia 76ers, which is who he was with most recently. He was also a head assistant with the Spurs for a long time under Greg Popovich. We all know how well the Popovich tree does with coaching under
It's
later
like the
on.
Sean McVay tree.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
You go to the well.
And so I think when you have the stabilization of Brad Stevens staying in organization, being the GM, bringing in Ime Udoka, the Celtics have been in the been in the conference finals 3 of the last 5 years. I really like Ime Udoka with the Celtics and their potential to be a conference finals team again. This team has not necessarily gotten worse player-wise, right? I mean,
not at all.
They're kind of the same. You just they're moving on to Ime Udoka to a little more vibe.
Yeah, and I like that pick. My one qualm with the Celtics, and I've said this before on the podcast, is I think it's super weird that Brad Stevens stuck around.
I like it.
I disagree. I think it's super weird. As a player, you're seeing your former head coach walk around and you're, running a new system. And what if Brad Stevens is opposing the new system because he's still an ex-coach. And have you ever met a coach? It's hard for them not to be a coach.
It's true.
And so you're running into that guy all the time around the locker room, around the facilities. So I think that fits really weird. That being said, he is inheriting a very good roster. Mm-hmm. They underperformed last year, but he is inheriting probably one of the best rosters of any coaching change in the NBA. And so I think that's a good pick. I'm going to go to who I sold.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the guy, the coach that I sold.
A little back and forth here, huh?
I'm selling former Maverick head coach Rick Carlisle.
Ooh, a little bitterness there, huh?
I wouldn't call it bitterness.
Okay.
I would say that the NBA has changed a lot.
Yes.
Since Rick Carlisle became the head coach of the Mavericks. And players react differently to coaching now than they did way back in the day. And I think Carlisle is such an old school head coach where he's a screamer. He's a yeller. He's a his way or the highway type of guy. And today in the NBA, you need more of a relationship between players and coaches. The player coaches do a lot better in the NBA than the hard-nosed, true head coaches, I guess is a better word for it, or, the old school head coaches.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
The players, like Frank Vogel, is basically, he's a good coach, X's and O's guys, great. But he's also, allowing his players to have feedback. He's willing to take feedback from his players. He's willing to listen. And now in the NBA, players want to be heard.
Yeah.
And Rick Carlisle is not necessarily very good at letting his players talk to him. He's very much a distant head coach. It was a big thing with the Mavericks. He didn't really have a great relationship with any of his players. He didn't really hang out with them outside of the facilities. It was his job. He came in, he coached. And don't get me wrong, he's a great coach, brought us a ship. I have nothing but love for the guy. But I do think that his coaching style leaves a little bit to be desired in today's NBA. And I think that there'll be a little bit of a disconnect between the players and the coaches over in Indiana.
I think that's totally fair. I I totally agree with everything you said. Carlisle is one of the better coaches in the NBA. When you're talking
would
about
say
just basketball coach, right?
I would say the best X's and O's coach in the NBA.
Yeah.
His ability to drop plays and his ability to run an offense is unparalleled in the NBA. That being said, his ability to get buy-in from players is where he falters.
Exactly. The Pacers are banking on the fact that they have a lot of professionals on their team. You know what I mean? Like they're banking on the fact that Brogdon is a professional, that Miles Turner, DeMontis Sabonis, TJ Warren, Karis LeVert, all these guys are professional basketball players, and they will understand where Carlisle is coming from. Where Carlisle, it gets a little stale after, what was it, almost 10, 15 years.
I think it ended up being 14
with
or something
like
that.
With the Mavericks. It gets a little stale, and you want to move on with something, especially when you have a guy as creative as Luka. So that I totally get that. I like that pick. I'm going to tell you who I sold.
Okay.
So I'm going to sell Willie Green with the New Orleans Pelicans. Part of this is because I just find a reason not to like the Pelicans for every year. I don't know why.
Pelicans, LaMelo Ball, and the Lakers. Death, taxes, and Mitch hating the Pelicans, LaMelo Ball, and the Lakers.
I don't know. It's fun that way. Here's what I think about this is last year, the Pelicans went into the year with Stan Van Gundy and with a team predicated on the idea of defense. They were one of the worst defensive teams last year.
They were not good.
They were not good on defense for whatever reason. And like it's like they had plenty of players that played good defense. They had a coach that played good defense, or a coach that coached good defense. That was a veteran.
Stan Van Gundy out there, shutting down.
Stan Van Gundy shutting people down. And now, so they moved on from Stan Van Gundy, who I think might be more along the lines of a Rick Carlisle, who was an old school coach, very much my way or the highway. And it's like, we're going to play my style of basketball. And they moved on to a guy in Willie Green, who's been an assistant with a couple of different teams, never a head assistant. Oof, I'm starting to slur a little bit. All right.
You're doing great.
We're doing great. Never been a head assistant. And now gets the head coach job with New Orleans Pelicans. From what I've heard, he is very well liked. Everyone loves Willie Green. I think that the team is really going to like him. Where I struggle is where the X and O's are going to come from, because that is what the Pelicans need. The Pelicans have plenty of talent. They got plenty of guys who know how to play basketball, but it's like you need what is the strategy with the Pelicans? What direction are they going in?
Yeah, and it's a tough spot to be in just because with Zion and his inability to just be like, hand me the ball and let me score type of guy, he's much more of like, put me in my position to succeed and I will succeed every single time situation, where it's like, that's where he needs a good X's and O's coach, because, a good, manager, for lack of a better word, a guy that, is good at managing egos and stuff. And that's a very underrated thing in a coach. It doesn't make him I'm not saying Willie Green's a bad coach, but a guy who struggles in the X and O's category needs a guy that can take the ball and just be better than people and just go score. And Zion's not necessarily that guy. He's a guy that I'm like Shaq. I will put me in my spot where I succeed, and I will succeed 100% of the time. But you got to get me there.
Totally agree.
And
totally
agree. It's a coach's job to get him there.
Yes. And it's a coach's job, and then it may be a little bit of personnel. I love Brandon Ingram. I would love to have Brandon Ingram on the Trailblazers. But I don't think he necessarily fits with a Zion. I think Zion needs a guy that can help him get where he needs to be. Right?
Which is funny because it sounds
almost like Lonzo? I
was about to say it sounds a lot like Lonzo Ball. So I'm going to move on and talk about the coach that I'm buying now. The guy
you're buying something finally.
Yeah. Have I sold everything?
I don't know.
I feel like I've sold a lot.
I feel like you've been selling a lot and I've been buying a lot lately.
Anyways, I'm going to talk about who I'm buying. And I kind of bent the rules on this one.
Oh, really?
I am buying former all-star players as coaches this year.
Okay, so let me think about this. So there's been a lot of players hired, right?
Yes.
Like Ime Udoka and like Willie Green were both players technically.
Technically, Rick Carlisle was a player.
Technically, Rick Carlisle was a player. So we're talking about all-star players only.
Yes.
Okay. So who are those guys?
You're going to like it. But it's Chauncey Billups and Jason Kidd.
And love that.
I'm buying.
Love that for us.
I'm buying for a very similar reason that I sold Rick Carlisle, in that all-star level players clearly know the game of basketball. They know the X's and O's. They know exactly what needs to be done, especially point guards. Both of them were point guards. So they know exactly how an offense is supposed to run. They know exactly how a defense is supposed to run. Yet they're former players, so they can relate to current NBA players. Just like the reason I sold Rick Carlisle was like he had a hard time relating to his players now. He had a hard time connecting with them. A guy who's been in Damian Lillard's shoes, in Luka Doncic's shoes, shoes, they can relate.
Yes.
Yet they are all-stars, and they're better yet, they're all-star point guards. So they know the X's and O's. So I think that both of them are going to do fantastic because they know the X's and O's, but they also know the game of basketball and know what it's like to be a player not so long ago in the game of basketball. So that when a player speaks to them, they listen and they understand where they're coming from. And again, NBA players right now want to be heard by their coaches. It's the days of the coach barking orders, blowing a whistle, and telling them to run are over. It's more of a relationship now. It's a two-way street. And both of these former players, current coaches, are building two-way streets in their program so far.
Oh, I just want snaps. Snaps. Love that. I totally agree with you. Yes, I will say both of us are biased on this. I am a big Trailblazers fan. I have heard a lot of stuff about Chauncey Billups. As a Mavericks fan, have heard a lot about Jason Kidd. I will say Ethan and I are both very good about keeping our ears to the ground on all the teams. We love following on social media, reading the articles from all the other teams, not just the Blazers, not just the Mavericks, but from everybody. I have not heard as good of news or as good of players' thoughts of coaches as what the Blazers players have said about Chauncey Billups and what the Mavericks players have said about Jason Kidd. Glowing reviews from what the players' perspectives are, and they're the most important people, right?
Which it's funny because the fan bases both are still not sold on the head coaching hires. Both fan bases are not necessarily about either of the head coaches, but the players love them. Both media days have had, like you said, glowing reviews. Both have it's almost injected like a whole breath of fresh air into both camps.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to speak from the Blazer perspective here. Damian Lillard, Yusuf Nurkic, Anthony Simons, Nasir Little, pretty much everyone but CJ, which is a little sus. It's just like absolutely blown away by what Chauncey's been able to bring this camp. They love how much they love his communication. I think that the specific point that both of our team's best players are Luka and Dame, point guards, and both the coaches that we brought in are point guards with Kidd and Billups, is a whole mindset that is different for those guys and just brings in a whole different element and is going to be really good. And they're players, coaches. They understand what the new era of players. They don't react well to coaches screaming at them and telling them how to play basketball. They react well with coaches that listen and is going to learn with them.
Yeah, and it's a two-way street because both coaches, yes, Jason Kidd has coached before, but he hasn't coached in a long time. So both the coaches, I think, are learning along with the players, which I think is kind of, again, a breath of fresh air. It's like, this guy isn't a drill sergeant that seems to know everything and is just like beating this into my head all the time. He's still figuring it out too, and we can kind of work on this together and help each other type of thing. And it's, again, like you said, a two-way street. From the Mavericks perspective, it seemed like it came down to Kristaps Porzingis or Rick Carlisle is what it seemed like it came down to. The organization had to choose between the two, and the fan base and the media seemed like they had given up on Kristaps. Well, the organization didn't see it that way, and they decided to go with what Kristaps wanted and get a new head coach, which after the coaching change, Luka had said nothing but glowing things about Carlisle, but he seems over the moon to have a guy who kind of understands the point guard role a little bit, because he constantly talks about, well, I'm learning from one of the greatest point guards of all time, so he can teach me things that no one else can. And that is something that seems to be invaluable to him.
When Kidd was originally hired, I really liked it for, if no other reason, Jason Kidd was one of the great triple-double point guards ever. Like, it was like Big O, and then it was like Jason Kidd, and then obviously Russell Westbrook has come around. But before Russell Westbrook, Jason Kidd was one of the great triple-double point guards who read the floor like no one else can, which is what Luka is so good at. That is what separates Luka, is the way that he sees the game. I think Jason Kidd sees the game in a similar way that he does, which is why I love Kidd as that hire. I love both your buys. They really make me feel good, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way the NBA is going nowadays, and so yes, I am buying former All-Star players because I have to,
Jason Kidd and Chauncey Billups.
Jason Kidd and Chauncey Billups. There's other players that are coaches, obviously, becoming new head coaches. I think it's going to be great. But Mitch, that wraps up today's podcast.
A little buy or sell.
Love a little buy or sell.
Yeah, I love a little NBA markets play.
Yes, absolutely. And we had a great whiskey along with us. Very flavorful, very good. It's a good one.
Yes, thank you. Pendergast Royal Gold Bourbon Whiskey out of Kansas City. You guys should definitely give it a try. It is very good. I gave it an 8.1. Ethan gave it a 7.5. And I think both of us can say we are so excited for the NBA season right around the corner to be coming up.
Yeah, I think so not next podcast, not the podcast after that, but the podcast after that will be a podcast after games have started.
Oh, man.
We are 3 podcasts away.
We're some math around there. Okay, we're 3 podcasts away. Everybody, thank you for listening. Please follow us on all of our social medias. Remember those names?
Yeah, we link them all into all of our descriptions of all of our podcasts, either on Spotify or on YouTube or on Patreon or on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you find us, we link all of our social medias in the description. So follow us on Instagram, follow us on our Twitter. Our Twitter's been dead lately, but Professor Tom has hinted that he might be coming back with some more Fire Pistons Team Morale Twitter content, which could be fun. But shout out to Pendergast. Shout out to all of you listeners. We do this for you guys, so we hope you guys enjoy the content. We'll be back with you guys again next week with another fun episode. We like doing these games like this. We're kind of tweaking our business model here at Team Morale to become less X's and O's and a little bit more fun games and stuff like this. So let us know if you like this change and if you want to see something more in the future. If you have any game ideas, please let us know and reach out. And yeah, it's always fun doing this for you guys. So we do this for you.
Yes, we love all of the members of Team Morale. It's another good one. Cheers, Ethan.
Cheers.